Hey, hey, good afternoon. So good to see you. Let me fix, there we go, fix the brightness on here so I can see myself. How are you? My name is Halana Black. I am a writing coach. I support people with starting um, freelance writing careers as well as writing books. And today we're talking about why start a writing career after the age of 40. Now, let me start by saying for myself, I kind of started my writing career a little bit later in life, in my sort of late 30s. Um, and I started as a blogger. Now, I have written, my whole life, but never really expected to be able to build a career as a writer until I got into like my late 30s. And I had started writing about food, health, and wellness, because that was what I was really excited about at the time. And I still am. Those are all things that I'm still really passionate about. And I'm actually working on a series of books that I want to be able to create of things that I have learned about food, health, and wellness over the last 10 plus years of dealing with my own health issues, mostly dealing with fibroids and just mental health and wellness, things like that. So, one of the pivot points in my career where I really started to take my life seriously as a writer was when I saw the movie, what is it called? Julie and Julia. If you're familiar with the story of Julia Child, um, Julia Child, the famous chef, had started, really didn't even publish her first cookbook until I think like her late 40s. She was about 48, 49 years old. And she actually didn't start cooking until she was somewhere in her 30s. And so a interest in food, health, and wellness, um, at least at that particular time, learning that I didn't sort of miss the boat. A lot of times we feel like we missed the boat when on certain things that we've wanted to do when we were younger, and think that we need to have 20 years of experience in order to experience some sort of success in that particular area. But we don't realize that once we get to our late 30s, early 40s, going on to our 50s, 60s, and even older, there's so many things that for us to be able to sort of benefit from, to be able to pull from in our experiences that actually make us a better writer. So let me tell you about the movie Julie and Julia if you haven't seen it before. It is based on the life of Julia Child, but the movie actually surrounds the story of Julie, who decides to take. I think it's one particular. I actually need to see it again. You can actually find it on Netflix, but she decides to take one of Julia's cookbooks and go through one recipe. I think a week or per day from one particular recipe, and she blogs about this particular experience. And she gained some notoriety about this project that she was doing. But while she's doing the project, we also get snippets of life, of what it was like for life for Julia Child. And so I was just really super inspired by this double story that was going on. One with Julia, the blogger, and how she was just really excited about the thing that she was excited about writing about, which was food, and in particular, following Julia Child's recipe to a T. That was the thing that she was super excited about. And then the story of Julia Child, of how she had started this whole career for herself a little bit later in life than what we normally expect for people who are successful to have started anything. So I really want to be able to speak today about why starting a career, a writing career in particular, after 40 is a great thing to do. It's a great thing to do. And let me give you four reasons why. Number one is that around the age of 40, you have more experience. You have more experience. So for many of us, we spent our teens, 20s, and 30s doing other things. We've done everything um, doing other things that other people expect us to do. So you probably went to school, maybe you raised a family, you did the job that you were supposed to do, and you just sort of followed the timeline, the program, for what it is that was expected of you. Perhaps you grew up in a particular culture and you were raised to live your life a certain way. If you belong to a certain gender, you're raised to behave a certain way within your gender, within your religion, or within the country that you were born in, the culture that you come from. There's always a set of expectations that are set before us, and we're expected to meet them. But at some point around the age of 40, for some of us it's a little bit before, some of us it could be way after. But there's something about that age of 40-ish where people just start asking questions. They start to ask questions. And when you start to ask that question, we get into number two, which is that you start to become more self-aware. Okay? So what does it mean to be self-aware? Self-awareness means that you start to ask questions about your life. You start to ask things like, do I like my life? Do I enjoy what I'm getting up to do every day? You start to ask, you know what, I really don't like this. Why am I doing this? What is my reasoning behind doing this? You start to ask questions about, who are you? Who am I really? Like, who am I, and do I want to be this person? Um, who is it that I want to be if it is not the person that I am today? And so what you find is that you'll start to align your behaviors and activities with your values and who it is that you want to be. That's really what self-awareness is. That's when you start to align your behaviors and your activities with your values and who it is that you want to be. And so when you start to reach that point, you'll start to have more valuable things to say. And that's really valuable to someone who is a writer. I don't care what type of a writer you are. I don't care if you're writing fiction books. If you're writing fiction books, then you're certainly going, if you're more self-aware, then you'll start to be more creative. You'll start to think about, your character development will be a lot more complicated, instead of just sort of one note characters, um, simply because you have personally had the experience of thinking a little bit deeper about who you are. Then you'll start to create characters who are that way. If you are writing nonfiction, if you're writing like your personal memoir, um, you'll have more to say about things like, let's say maybe a divorce is a part of your particular memoir. So instead of just writing about, let's say you were angry about your divorce, which most people are. Um, Originally, you're angry about it, and you may just want to write about the fact that you were angry and how your partner may have did you wrong. It may all be true, but at some point, you'll reach a point in your self-awareness where you're just like, okay, let me start to ask myself how I actually participated in this marriage. Like for myself, for a long time, I was very, very angry about my own particular divorce, and I would, sort of write out in my journal about how angry I was and what my husband did to me and all sorts of other things. And then I got to a point where I started to realize I wasn't even supposed to be in this relationship in the first place. So you can only spend but so many years being angry at the person that you were in a relationship with, because I participated in it. And so once I reach that level of self-awareness, I have more things to say about my own personal transformation, my own self-transformation. And that is a lot more valuable to other people who are going to read that story than just writing about how pissed off I was about what this other person did to me. Um, what else did I want to say about that? Yeah, so yeah, self-awareness, that was point number two. Um, So when you start to have things that are more valuable to say, you'll know that your self-awareness and your experience will um, contribute to you having more things to say. Um, that just makes your writing a lot more rich, and it'll make it more interesting, and people will be able to gravitate towards what it is that you're saying. Um, so then let me ask the question of the day. What's stopping you from going after your writing dreams? What's stopping you from going after your writer dreams while you're thinking about those two things? What's stopping you from going after your writing dreams? If you know that you have experience, hopefully you're a bit more self-aware than you were, 1 year ago, 5 years ago, certainly 10 or 20 years ago. Um, what's stopping you from being able to share what it is you want to write about? You can put that in the comments below. So, third reason why you should start a writing career after 40 is because you've learned how to be more resilient. I was talking yesterday about starting a freelance writing career, and that how being a resilient freelance writer is important for me because I get rejected every day. I get rejected every day. Everybody doesn't like my writing. Um, Sometimes, we may not even get to the point where I even take them on as a client because for whatever reason, I may not have the experience, I may not have that they're looking for. And so, you face a lot of rejection. And so, as a writer, you got to learn how to deal with that. And so, by the time you've gotten to 40, even if you've never really stopped to write anything before, um, I'm sure that there's plenty of things that you have failed at by the time you're 40, and you learn things from it. It's not like you just failed and that was the end of that. You get to a point where you learn that your failures, and whether it was in your career, maybe it was something in in the way that you've perhaps raised your children, um, perhaps it's something in the way that you've been looking at yourself throughout your whole life. You realize that you have failed or you have been rejected many, many times over and over again in your life. And because of that rejection, you have more things to be able to say about it. You have more ways to be able to inspire other people to be able to get through that rejection. Um, and it's also really just a great way to be able to sort of support yourself in your process, in your growing process. For those of you who are not necessarily looking to become a writer, write for other people, but you want to be able to write for yourself, writing really helps you to learn how to deal with some of that failure and rejection that you face. Either growing up as a kid and you're trying to sort of grow out of that even as an adult. That's some of the things that I've learned when I turned 40. A lot of the things that we never faced when we were a kid, we continue to grow up with it. And it sort of hangs on, it hangs on within us until we learn to face it and find a way to be able to turn our mind around about how we look at it and use it in our life. So even in like if you're just, doing a journaling process, um, if that's the level of writing that you're doing, learning you've learned hopefully how to deal with rejection at some level. And you can either use the writing to be able to work through the rejection in your journaling, or you can share what you've learned through the rejection as a professional writer by writing a book and sharing your story with others. And then lastly, number four, why start why you should start a writing career after 40. Mostly, and probably most important, at least in my eyes, is because we realize that we're growing old. We're growing old. And there have probably been people around you by this age who died before their time. This is really important. Writing a book is one of those things that a lot of people want to do, but never really have the courage to sit down and do for many reasons. And so when you get to an age where maybe some of your classmates have died before their time, for myself, my mom died when she was 49 from breast cancer. And so um, that was really something that really stuck with me. I was 29 when she passed away. And so that made it real clear for me. And she had breast cancer or some type of cancer for 10 years, for the last 10 years of her life. So that was the 10 years of her family, myself and my sister, and my mom sort of riding out the waves of cancer with her until she passed away at the age of 49. And just sort of seeing her sort of deal with the end of her own life and knowing that there were things that she wanted to do in her life and she didn't get to do them because illness sort of cut that time down. It starts to really make you think about your own life and what it is that you're doing with it, really. And particularly if you're happy and healthy. That was one of the things that I also did. My mom's illness um, pushed me to move forth and decide to take the leap and travel when I was 40, 41 years old. Is when I went to Thailand. Because if I had gotten to a point where I was going to be 49 and facing the end of my life, and I never got to live abroad in the way that I wanted to do it, not connected to a job. I wanted to be able to make my living as a writer while traveling overseas. And I wanted to be able to do that um, without the threat, without the threat of cancer on my back. So that was really important for me. So when you realize that you're starting to grow old, when you realize that you're starting to grow old, you're realizing that you don't have forever to fulfill these dreams, and it's either you're going to do it now, or not doing it now means that you're choosing to not do it at all. Maybe you'll pick it up later, maybe at another time, but maybe why do maybe when you can do it now? I remember when I was maybe like 36 or 37 and I had a regular job. I was working at a university, and I had a coworker. Um, Went home on a Friday. I remember seeing her. We waved to each other. She drove past, and she was so happy to go home and see her daughter. Um, we all went home, had a great weekend. We came back in on Monday morning, and another coworker said, "Hey, did you read your email?" And I said, "No." And I read my email, and I read that that coworker that I said goodbye to on Friday night, she had passed away. And I'm absolutely devastated. I'm like, what happened? And I never really got the story of what happened to her. But from what another coworker had told me was that she just went to bed, and she didn't wake up the next day. And unfortunately, her 12-year-old daughter was the one found her, uh, who found her unalive. Um, and so what that really brought home to me was that she was only a year older than I was. And that was when I was sort of dabbling in my writing, but I didn't want to be in the job that I was in. I wanted to be doing other things. I wasn't quite clear on what I wanted it to be, but I knew for sure that I didn't want to be there. And so seeing my coworker's death um, really sort of brought home the point of how important it is for us to be able to take our lives a little bit more seriously and to get serious about the fact that we want to be able to we have these goals and dreams that we want to be able to reach forth, and we need to be able to give ourselves the time and space to be able to go after them, because we're not going to have them forever. We're only here for a really short time, and when you reach the age of 40 you start to really realize that. So what's stopping you from going after your writer dreams? That's the question of the day. You can put the answer down below. So, once again, my name is Helana Black. I help people go after their writer dreams. I help them with their freelance writing career, as well as help them with book coaching, and get started on trying to figure out how to make a living out of their writing. That's what I do. So you can go to the link in the description, or you can just go to halanablack.com and click on freelance writer coaching and set up an appointment, and we can talk to each other that way. So that's all I have for today. Talk to you tomorrow. Peace.